College, class of 1971. Today we're going to look at a display that we've just completed here at the San Jose State Special Collections Chicano Library on the 5th floor of the Martin Luther King Library at San Jose State. And this display is in honor of Cesar Chavez and the Cesar Chavez holiday this month of March 2005. What you're going to see here is a story of the San Jose State Great Boycott Committee that was formed in 1970. The original members of the group were Ramon Martinez, that's me, Sid Flores, who is now an attorney in San Jose, Pete Michelle, who retired as an administrator here at San Jose State, and Josie Camacho, who is a Filipina student from Oakland, who is now an organizer for the SEIU Workers Union, Liz Martinez, who is now a social worker at Santa Clara County Social Services Agency. And the whole purpose of the committee was to involve students, not just Latinos, but all students, in supporting the Great Boycott during 1970. During that time, the community and the school and the students worked very closely together. You also have in this display the copy of the first issue of ¿Qué tal?, which is a magazine that the students started in 1970. And if you visit the library, you'll find about 5 years of the ¿Qué tal? Magazine. And it's a real good way to look at what students were doing and what students were thinking at the time. Yeah, I'm done. Okay. One of the things the Great Boycott Committee did on campus was to organize a Chicano table. That's a place where students could sit. What happened in 1970 is suddenly there were at least 2,000 or more Latino Chicano students on the campus, when previously, probably in 1968, there were 500. Governor Reagan, Ronald Reagan, passed the Economic Opportunity Act during those years, and that gave Latino students entry to the university. Didn't last real long. The program had very wide open university doors for about 4 or 5 years. In any case, students needed ways to come together. The other documents that are shown here are when students went to the new student union kitchen, the student union cafeteria, and threw all the grape products on the floor and had the cafeteria manager sign a document pledging not to use grape products. Also in the display was a letter that the students received from Cesar Chavez, talking about the efforts of the students here at San Jose State. And it also talked about a fundraising concert that was going to be held here at the school called Fiesta Campesina. The rock concert included Malo, Tower of Power, Luis Gasca, who later played trumpet for Janis Joplin and Big Brother and the Holding Company. And it also has a picture of Cesar at San Jose State Spartan Stadium during 1971. The 1970s were a real confusing era because so many things were going on. Remember that the Vietnam War, protests were coming their strongest. The civil rights movement was really opening up across the country. And so one of the things the students from San Jose State did was go to Los Angeles for the anti-war Chicano moratorium. And one of the things that happened there was that Ruben Salazar, who was a columnist for the LA Times, was killed during that moratorium. And there are lots of stories about his writings. Look for Ruben Salazar's writings, and again, to understand what was going on at the time. These are all pictures of San Jose State students who attended the Chicano moratorium in LA. During the 1970s, the Great Boycott was being supported in the community. It was being supported by professors at the university and by the students. In those days, the Chicano ideal was that there wouldn't be separation between the university, the faculty, and the community's needs. These pictures are of various Great Boycott marches in San Jose. This one in particular was a march to St. James Park. And you'll also begin to see the Huelga eagle and the buttons that were beginning to establish the symbols that are now very commonly connected to not just farm worker issues, but to Chicano human development issues. Copies of El Malcriado magazine. That was the farm workers magazine. Later on you'll see some original El Malcriado leaflets. Like I said earlier, the EOP program was the way in which many restrictions about coming to the university level were lowered in the 1970s for about 5 years. And although the students were admitted and there was some financial aid available, there wasn't a lot of support such as counseling and other things to help the students. So unless they were very well prepared, the students didn't last very long in the university. One of the things we did was march from San Jose to Sacramento twice. And these pictures are about the photos of the first march that took place. And you'll see Professor Jose Carrasco, who was a longtime leader of students here at the university, and Victor Garza, who later formed the Raza Roundtable, which is an important advocacy group here in San Jose on the march. You'll also see pictures of students walking. We gathered on North 13th Street, which used to be a drive-in theater, and then we walked from there to Thornton and to Niles, then Thornton. There was only one part where you really couldn't cross over the mountains to the Stockton side. They wouldn't let us walk on the roads or freeways. And so then on the Thornton-Stockton side, we then walked from there to Sacramento. As I recall, the march took about 3 or 4 days. And again, you can read lots of detail about the march in issues of Que Tal that contain lots of pictures and details about the march. Again, the 1970s had lots of things going on at the national level, the local level, and the worldwide level. There was lots of activity. First of all, the Vietnam War was being protested, the civil rights movement was in full force, and President Nixon visited San Jose during that time, at which there were large anti-war demonstrations. In the community, these documents talk about the event where Judge Gerald Chargan in juvenile court talked about Chicanos and talked about us being animals, and maybe Hitler was right. And it's a good example of how attitudes about Chicanos could be openly expressed in court and by police and at City Hall. The other event that is documented here is Fiesta De La Rosas, which was a city attempt to bring back an event about old Spanish days, about this mythical time when we were a Spanish colony. And there were great community protests about that event. The other item in this display documents the police killing of Danny Trevino in San Jose, and the community's first time beginning to do large-scale protests about police practices towards Latinos. There are many newspapers and weekly newsletters in the Chicano Library collection that talk about these activities not only in San Jose but across the state. Everywhere, in every community, newspapers and weekly small magazines were being published talking about the struggles of communities across the state. As you can see, as we look at the end of this display, the Huelga eagle is a very prominent theme in most materials of the era. And that really alludes to the power of symbols that we see every day, both positive and negative. The Huelga Eagle was Cesar's gift to us. As San Jose State alumni Betty Martinez noted, the Huelga Eagle was a symbol that lifted humble people and helped them hold their heads high. The Huelga Eagle continues to be used as a symbol of the march of the Latino people towards self-determination. You also see here in this display a red volume of hearings of un-American activities in California by the California State Senate in 1967. And you clearly see the red symbol of the book, alluding to what at the time was a real common Chairman Mao Zedong's Little Red Book. And it's alluding to the unpatriotic, possibly communist-influenced huelga effort of the time. And the other symbol you see here is the Virgen de Guadalupe that certainly became the symbol in all the protest marches that were being held in those days and continues to be seen today whenever there are protests, marches. In today's era, you can see that there's lots of multimedia material regarding the Great Boycott and the Chicano history. And certainly here in the Chicano Library, there's lots of material available for you to look up and better understand the journey of the Chicano youth movement from the 1970s to the present era. The display case here has books, tapes, videos, CD-ROMs that are available talking about Cesar Chavez and the meaning of the Great Boycott. The basic message is that, not many of us necessarily are connected to farm workers, but the huelga was the activity that galvanized our becoming stronger as a group, our working towards our rights, and are organizing ourselves to lead the state in which we will be the greatest population, more than 50% by the year 2040. Dr. Carlos Muñoz Jr., who wrote Youth Identity and Power, is probably the premier chronicler of the Chicano student movement from the 1960s to the present. He recently retired from his professorship at UC Berkeley, but you can look him up on the net where you'll see his extensive writings on the Chicano youth movement. We hope this tour of the display here at the Special Collections Chicano Library at San Jose State gives you an interest in coming and seeing the other materials that are here in the collection. We also hope that you get involved in talking to people who are part of San Jose State student, faculty, and community story so that we can get materials from them and collect them here where they can be seen and appreciated by the next generation. There are many other stories that can be told. The story of the Chicano commencement is one of the most important stories. There are lots of stories to be told about former students who have gone on and worked in the community for improvement of Chicano community conditions. The story of the Frito Bandito Club from the 1970s, talks about attitudes towards Latinos as being basically sleeping under the cactus, or everyone has a mustache, etc. Even though we're at the 25th annual Chicano commencement, and our distinguished graduate, Dr. Fernando Torres Gil, who was an Undersecretary of Health under President Clinton, still stereotypes exist about who we are.